Robbie Lawler was never supposed to be subtle, patient, or tactical in the traditional sense. From the moment he stepped into a cage, his identity was already defined, not by wins, not by belts, but by violence. Every fight felt like a statement, not just to his opponent, but to the sport itself. When people say war every time, they are not repeating a slogan. They are describing a promise Lawler made and never broke. He did not enter fights to survive rounds or protect records. He entered to test limits, his own included. Pain was not something to avoid. It was something to accept. Blood was not a setback. It was proof that the fight was real. Fans did not tune in to watch Robbie Lawler because they expected perfection. They tuned in because they expected chaos. What made Lawler different was not only his aggression, but his consistency. Many fighters talk about being warriors. Few live it every single time the door closes behind them. Win or lose, Lawler never changed his approach. He believed that if he fought with everything he had, the outcome would take care of itself. That belief would define his career, elevate him to legend status, and eventually cost him more than anyone expected. Robbie Lawler entered professional fighting with something most fighters spend years trying to develop: fearlessness. As a teenager, he was already competing against grown men, and he never looked intimidated. His athleticism was obvious, but it was his willingness to exchange that separated him from the rest. He did not hesitate. He did not calculate danger the way others did. He stepped forward. Early in his career, Lawler's fights felt wild and unpredictable. Power shots, reckless exchanges, moments of brilliance mixed with moments of poor decision-making. Coaches saw potential, but they also saw a fighter who relied heavily on instinct. When things went his way, he looked unstoppable. When they did not, he looked lost. At a young age, Lawler entered the UFC during a time when the sport was still evolving. Experience mattered. Patience mattered even more. Lawler had neither. He trusted his chin, his power, and his heart. For a while, that was enough. But the division grew stronger, smarter, more disciplined. Fighters began to exploit Lawler's aggression. Losses started to pile up, not because he lacked ability, but because he refused to change who he was inside the cage. That refusal would become both his greatest flaw and his defining trait.
He's trying to get the arm. I don't think he realizes.
There it is. It's all over.
After early UFC struggles, the narrative around Robbie Lawler shifted quickly. Once seen as a future star, he was suddenly labeled inconsistent. Analysts questioned his fight IQ. Fans wondered if he had peaked too early. In a sport that moves on fast, Lawler was quietly pushed aside. Outside the spotlight, Lawler continued fighting. He traveled. He competed in different organizations. He refined his skills without attention. There were improvements, but there were also losses that reinforced the idea that he would never reach the top again. For many fighters, this is where motivation fades. For Lawler, it became fuel. He did not chase popularity. He did not reinvent himself to please critics. Instead, he leaned deeper into who he already was. The violence remained, but it became controlled. The chaos became purposeful. Lawler learned when to explode and when to wait, without losing his identity. When he returned to the UFC, expectations were low. He was older, scarred, considered a gatekeeper at best. But something had changed. Lawler was no longer reckless. He was calculated, still brutal. What followed was one of the most unexpected resurgences in UFC history. Robbie Lawler did not become champion by abandoning violence. He became champion by mastering it. Instead of trying to fight like everyone else, he committed fully to the role that felt natural. He accepted that every fight would hurt. He accepted that damage was inevitable. This mindset transformed his performances. Lawler no longer rushed exchanges without reason. He stood his ground, absorbing punishment, waiting for the perfect moment to return fire. His striking became sharper. His timing improved. His confidence grew with every brutal victory. Fights against elite opponents turned into battles of will. Lawler refused to back down, even when exhaustion and pain set in. Opponents realized that hurting him was not enough. They had to break him. No one could. This era of Lawler was defined by resilience. Cuts opened, blood flowed. His expression never changed. No panic, no hesitation, only forward movement and heavy hands. Fans understood something special. These were not just fights, they were tests of endurance. Lawler was no longer chasing validation. He was proving something deeper.
What a fantastic career, and what a moment for ruthless Robbie Lawler.
Robbie Lawler's championship run is remembered not for dominance, but for survival. Every title fight felt like it could end at any moment. The margins were razor thin. The damage was immense. Yet, Lawler thrived. His fights became instant classics. Back and forth exchanges. Final round surges. Moments where sheer willpower decided the outcome. Lawler never coasted. Even when ahead, he pressed forward. Even when behind, he fought as if victory was still within reach. These wars elevated his legacy. Fans respected him not just as a champion, but as a symbol of toughness. Judges' decisions were often controversial, but always earned. However, there was a cost. Each war took something from him. Recovery took longer. Damage lingered. But Lawler never complained. He understood the trade-off: a shorter prime, more pain, fewer easy nights. But immortality in the eyes of fans. For Robbie Lawler, that price was worth paying. Eventually, time caught up. Reactions slowed. Explosiveness faded. Against younger opponents, the margins disappeared. Losses replaced victories. Decisions went the other way. The same toughness that once carried him now exposed him to prolonged punishment. Still, Lawler refused to change. He did not become defensive. He did not avoid exchanges. He fought the same way. For some, this was stubbornness. For others, it was integrity. Fans watched with mixed emotions: admiration, concern. The damage was visible, the outcomes harder to watch. Yet Lawler never quit, never embarrassed himself. Every fight still felt like a war. That consistency became his final statement. He would not rewrite his story. He would finish it the same way he started. Robbie Lawler never chased perfection. He never protected his legacy with safe choices. He accepted the consequences of how he fought. There were easier paths. He could have adapted, fought cautiously, extended rounds. But that would not have been Robbie Lawler. He chose authenticity over longevity. Even in defeat, he remained unmistakable. Losses did not erase his impact. They reinforced it. Every scar became part of the story. Greatness is not always measured in titles or statistics. Sometimes it is measured in honesty, and Lawler never betrayed himself. Robbie Lawler's legacy is simple. People remember moments. They remember wars. They remember a fighter who never gave them a boring night. He represents an era where heart mattered, where standing your ground meant something. War every time was not marketing, it was truth. Titles fade, records change, legends endure. Robbie Lawler chose war, every single time.